All right. Well, happy Monday again. It's a Monday. It's a bad day for network outages or DHCP or whatever happened to be the problem here. So I'm glad you folks made it. However you found your schedule. Awesome. Later on, it shouldn't be this bad, I hope. So we'll see how that goes for you. So this is CIS 150, Computer Science 1. This is the 6th section. Thank you all for registering. I wasn't going to teach the class, and then my department chair was like, hey, a bunch of people want to take the class. Do you want to teach it? I was like, sure, I like C++ and 150. I love teaching the intro to programming classes. It's one of my favorite things to do because you're just starting out. It's a lot of fun. If you've not programmed before, hopefully you'll enjoy it. If you do hate it, some advice I got from folks who would hang out in the game lab, juniors and seniors, they said, if you hate it, it's okay to change majors. Now, I'm not an advisor. Just take that for what it's worth. Just because you started down this track doesn't mean you have to go down it. So just some advice there. But I like to imagine anyone can code because it's a lot of fun. It's a very creative process, and that's why I like it. So, oh, by the way, I'm Eric. Nice to meet you all. Not a professor. I'm a lecturer because things are weird here at the university. Sure. Doesn't really matter much at all. If you call me professor, I'll probably say I'm not a professor because I like to be pedantic about it and illustrate that the college doesn't allow me to use that title. After I've been teaching here for 12 years, I can ask them nicely if I can have the title, please. And I just think that's kind of amusing. So that's all. So this is me. This is my email address. If you email me, there's a feature in Canvas that says email. Don't use that, please, because it doesn't go to my main inbox. It goes to like the non-priority inbox because my phone thinks, oh, hey, it's from Canvas again. You don't care because Canvas sends way too many emails. If you've never used Canvas before, you'll learn that very soon. You get lots of notifications from Canvas. So, once it's online again. So we'll get there. But yeah, so email me directly, and that'll definitely come to my phone, and it will pop up right away, which is easier for me. I mean, I'll see the other messages eventually, but if you want to get to me quick, that's what you can do. This is my cell phone number. There's like a phone that has a voicemail somewhere here. Just don't use it, please, because I never check it, because why? Just use my cell phone. I text. I'm a millennial, so it's always in my pocket. I text people. I actually dislike phone calls. I fit that stereotype, sure. They're fine. I don't avoid phone calls, but texting is easier. I do have an office location. It's a shared office space in the CIS building, which is a fun building because there's no classrooms there. Where are we? I think it's behind us right now. I think it's over that way. It's a brick building in the middle. So 239 is the room I'll be hanging out in before class Mondays and Wednesdays, and then Wednesdays after my other class, I'll come back there and hang out. If you want to meet in person, great, always happy to chat. If you want to meet virtually by appointment, we're pretty decent at this virtual technology stuff by now, and in case you're busy those times, my schedule is generally pretty flexible. So, let me know. And screen sharing is great because that way I can see your code and you don't have to lug your laptop around or whatever you want to do. So, all right. Somehow this class is 4 credit hours, despite us meeting for 2.5 hours for lecture time and 1:45 for lab time, because lab time counts different than lecture time, and I still don't understand the whole system. But it's worth 4 credits, essentially. So we'll be here twice a week in this room for lecture time where I get to talk at you, and then we'll be in the HPEC, which is the building attached to this one over that way, in the computer lab, Monday afternoons, and then that's more the time where you get to go practice things. We have lab exercises you'll work on, and I can actually walk around the room and help you with it. So lots of fun. All right. And just shout at me, please, if you want me to stop or slow down or go back to something. I'm very informal. It's really okay. Because if something's not clear to you, it's probably not clear to the person next to you or someone down the row. Okay, so just you're helping your friends out by asking questions. The course description should be a copy paste from the catalog, unless I did that wrong. Our program learning goals, the way school works, everything sort of maps to your program and these learning goals for the program. I don't know if you actually care or not, but you can go check these out here. These are things you'll learn eventually in the classes that you take as part of your program if you're in the CIS major. For some specific course objectives, they measure these sort of things and we assess them across all the different sections, no matter who teaches it, to see how folks are doing and generally to see if someone's doing a bad job at teaching it, which is, it's a generally fair way to look at that, but it gets weird because I get to report my own numbers. So like, am I going to say all my students are failing this and make me look bad? Just a cautionary tale on what you measure. But so we'll talk about UML use case and activity diagrams. This must sound very exciting, I'm sure. We'll get to it. It's okay. Don't worry. We'll write recursive procedures. Interesting. I'll get back to you on that one because I think that got taken out. I'll check. Small programs and a modern programming language. We're going to use C++. C++ is great. It's been around a long time, but it's still being updated, still has lots of really cool features. We'll write some small programs, and we're just getting started. We'll edit, compile, and execute programs using an integrated programming environment, such as MS Visual Studio. I love Visual Studio. If you're on Windows, it's a fantastic tool. If you have a Mac, there's a different tool you can use, and it does the job. I personally don't like Macs, but that's just a personal failing of mine. Other people love Macs, and great, it works just fine. C++ runs on both, which is awesome. It runs on all sorts of different devices. It's really cool. I'm going to do everything on Windows. Our computer lab is in Windows. These computers are Windows. So, whatever you want to do, that's okay. I'm pretty flexible. And then we'll be able to use a program such as MS Visio to draw UML activity diagrams, these things we talked about up here. We'll do that in the lab because Visio is an expensive piece of software that you probably don't have. And that's okay. I actually do them in Word most of the time because I don't usually buy the expensive software. And, you just make pretty pictures. And you can do that in Word. Anyway, so those are things we'll get to throughout the semester. For our textbook, there's actually this online interactive textbook, which is really cool. You can like code right in your browser and go through these activities, and then it has this cool Xi Labs feature, which will be very obnoxious for a while because it's very specific about like individual spaces being correct, but you'll get used to it, and then it helps you focus on details, I like to imagine, so that people don't hate it so much. But it's good practice being very, very attentive to detail when you're programming, because depending on what you're doing, details matter, right? If you're in banking, the details matter. If you're in healthcare, the details matter. If you're writing apps on a phone so someone can play Brick Breaker, the details don't matter that much. But a lot of things matter. Was that a question? Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's $89, and then you don't get to keep it, which sucks. But you can like print off individual chapters as PDFs and keep the PDF, then you'll never go back to again in your life because you can just Google stuff if you want to learn more about C++. Yeah. No, because Canvas was down and has been down. Like many of you, maybe. I'm sure you're better people than I am. You don't leave things to the last minute. I left this to the last minute yesterday, like to post all the stuff in Canvas, and I sit down at my desk at home and Canvas doesn't load. And then I can't log in. It will be, yes. it'll get to Canvas eventually once they figure out things. So our poor IT folks here are having a rough Sunday and today. I used to do IT operations, and most of the time it's fine. But when it goes badly, it just sucks. Yeah. So you definitely want to get this, and you actually get points for doing it. So like 10% of your grade in the class comes from just doing the things in the textbook. You can pass without it. There's tons of information online you can find about C++. This is a nice resource. It walks you through it. It's interactive. You can code in the browser. It takes you through these examples. I'm fond of it. I don't love that they charge so much money for a website, but they used to be cheaper until they got bought out by one of the publishers, like the big publishing companies. I think it's Wiley now owns them, and they jacked up the prices. They're like, hey, students can pay more. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. I'll go off on tangents a lot, and you just bring me back to focus, and that's okay. But we'll get there. So you use this book code, and we'll get you access to it for the particular class. It's pretty good. And it helps you walk through the practice exercises. If you like textbooks, you can go pick up this one here. Sure. Some people love other examples, and that's great. So I'm going to try and give you examples. The book will give you examples. If you want more examples, you could get another textbook. You could go out to YouTube. You could go find other things. You could go ask ChatGPT for examples. You got lots of choices, right? However you learn best, great. You go learn, because I think by now you probably know how you learn. Yeah. No. So the Xi books, I think is how they say it. So this is the main text. This will be the bulk of the content that we go through will come out as iBooks, and we'll use that to kind of focus our energies on the different chapters as we go. Lots of other examples out there as well. No, this is just, if you like textbooks, you're welcome to go check this one out. I don't recommend you spend a lot of money on it. So, I think they have one in the library. It's been a little while since I checked, but so up to you. And then other cool tools we're going to use. Eventually, when we have internet access, we'll use the GitHub desktop client, which is a really cool tool. So GitHub is a cloud service provider of the Git source control system, written by our friend Linus Torvald, the founder of Linux. Git is fantastic. It's very powerful. It's the most widely used source control tool in the industry. GitHub is the hosting provider for it. They make money selling that service to organizations, and turns out they give it away for free to people who want to do open source stuff for educational use, because they want people to start using their tool early to get them hooked. Right? It's the okay, that's probably a bad example, but you give someone their first hit free. All right, I went there. I'm sorry. So, and then we're going to use a C++ compiler, such as Visual Studio 2022 Community Edition for PC, or Xcode for Mac. You got choices here. Our friends over in Ann Arbor have a really cool website with a tutorial on how to go download those things and install them. You probably don't need the tutorial. I think you can do it. But if you have trouble, check out the tutorial, contact me. I'll help you through it. It's not too bad. So those are the main two programs we're going to use. So Git and GitHub is for code collaboration. This idea that it's the cloud service provider for the Git source control tool. So you can get your source code, the code we write, we call that source code, into the cloud so that you can share it. Whether or not you're working individually, it's really just a backup then, or you can have it shared on multiple devices. Or if you're working with a team, then the team can share the code with this central location, and everyone can synchronize with it, and all sorts of interesting processes and things that go on behind the scenes with Git. It's phenomenal. We're just going to scratch the surface of it here, but I despise putting code as attachment files in Canvas or other course management tools, because it's awful. And then people have to zip their projects up, and then they have to attach zip files, and sometimes it's hard for people to zip the files. They don't get the right files, or it's just stupid because it's not meant for code, right? Git is meant for code, and GitHub gives away their tool for free, which is a beautiful website, which is really easy to use and friendly. I use it in the industry all the time. So we're going to use the tool that they use in the industry, right? No one uses Canvas for code in the industry, right? I think that one's pretty obvious. So we're not going to do it. If you take classes with other people and they want you to turn your code in on Canvas, just smile and nod. It's okay, right? When you get out the industry and you work and someone gives you a paycheck for doing something, you kind of follow their process and you smile and nod. Say, sure, okay, this is the way we do it now. It's okay, right? We'll adapt. So awesome. Visual Studio has a gazillion buttons. It's a little overwhelming at first, and that's okay if you feel overwhelmed at first. We're just going to click 5 of the buttons out of the hundreds. I'll show you which 5 we need. Everything else we can get to later, right? Eventually, we might look at some of the other cool bells and whistles. But for our purposes, we only really need 5 buttons, okay? So we'll get there. How you get your grade in the class. This is the part everyone seems to care about here. We do zyBooks. That's that online interactive textbook just for completing the exercises. You can get 10% of your grade done essentially as your homework. This is my study time, reading the book, textbook, because you all read the book, right, for classes? Yeah, definitely. I've read all of my college textbooks all the time because it's very important to do that. I'm sure you're better people than I am. And now you get points for doing it. So that's your incentive to actually go and do some reading. The lecture time we have, my time to talk at you is limited. I'm going to try and give you some highlights, give you some examples, give you things. The way that people learn tends to be through repetition. Right? So if you hear me say it, and then you read it, and then you do it, and then you practice a lab exercise, and then you do a homework, and then you do a project, you've gotten it 5, 6, 7, 8 times now. Right? Maybe after a couple times, and we'll start to stick. That's sort of the goal. Right? If you can remember it the first time someone says it, amazing. You are a better person than I am. Great. That's okay. A lot of people need repetition. That's what we do. In addition to these iBooks, we have our lab sessions that we meet Monday afternoons. Right? I think you're all in my lab session. They try and discourage people from taking different ones, but the scheduling gets really weird. So Sure. But we'll meet Monday afternoons and do other lab exercises that are not in zyBooks. So zyBooks has Labs. That's part of the zyBook score. We have our own labs that I'll assign, and then you'll turn in those sorts of things through Canvas. Right? You get 10% more of your grade. The goal with labs is you get them done. Right? This is your chance to practice the things we've talked about. Now the cadence is a little weird because it's like in between our 2 lectures. We'll figure it out. It'll be okay. So we'll have some chance to practice. If the lab doesn't make sense, you got to ask. Right? You can work with the partner in labs. That's great. Learning together with another person is fantastic. You are more than welcome to work with a partner, work in a group of 3 in the lab. Now, what you don't do is ask one person to send the solution to everybody, and everyone just turns in the same thing. Like that defeats the purpose of the practice, right? But sitting together, talking through your problems in lab, fantastic. I can wander around the room, help you with the labs, right? Everyone should get 100% on their labs every time, because that's your goal, right? We're just doing the practice here. If you're not getting 100% on the labs, you got to be talking to me more and figuring out what's going on. There are some additional services. So the College of Engineering has a student success center, I forget what they call it now, that has like tutoring appointments you can go get, which is awesome. We've got a SI who sent me an email. I've never met them before, but they are a student who's taken this class before and did really well in it, and they can also help. I think they're going to run sessions. I have to get more info, but email's down as well. So I couldn't email them and ask for more information about that. So lots of great things to help, which is awesome. So 20% of your score, essentially participation points, right? You just got to try and you can get 20% of your score, right? The rest of your score comes from projects. So we've got 4 projects throughout the semester. These are individual projects you work on with your own effort. They're every other week or so for the first couple weeks, or first 2/3 of the class, right? We'll do a project. So this is something bigger. So in terms of, we'll talk about tools and techniques and tips and things we can do with code. I'll give you examples. We'll practice things in lab, and then you get a bigger thing to work on. That's the project to work on, where I might not have shown you exactly, hey, it looks like this, and you just have to change the number 3 to a number 5. It doesn't work like that with projects, right? This is a little bit bigger, a little more. You have to think through it and do some things. I'll still help with projects, but I'm not going to solve them for you. Like with the labs, sure, I'll solve it for you. If you're really that stuck, that's okay. The projects, I'll point you in the right direction, try and get you unstuck. But you've got to figure this out here, because that's what we're learning to do, is to solve problems with code, which is a lot of fun. The hard part in coding is not actually like typing out the code. The hard part in coding is figuring out how to take a complex problem and make a stupid computer solve it for you. Because computers are really dumb, right? They will do exactly what you tell them to do and only what you tell them to do. If you tell the computer to do the wrong thing, it'll do the wrong thing because you told it to do it. So we have to figure out how to correctly solve problems. And that's what's interesting about coding, right? We take interesting, complex problems and try and solve them on a computer. Now, and nothing wrong with building apps, and people who build apps and entertainment things, like that's still problems to solve. Like how do you make the screen look pretty and things like that, and how do you get your users addicted to your game by making sure they come back every day to check in for their bonuses and all sorts of game theory sort of things. Sure, but other problems that we solve in healthcare or the mobility space or other places, whatever you might be interested in, are also complex problems that needs good solutions. Okay, we have one exam. I'm not fond of exams, and having worked in the industry for 15 plus years, how many is it now? How old am I? 16 years. 16 years. No one ever gave me a test, like ever, which I think makes sense. Like you don't take tests for a living. That's kind of silly. So we only have the one exam. They look at my syllabus funny if I have no exams, because we're not technically like a project-based course, so I still have a midterm. It won't be too bad, I promise. I'll give you an example midterm the last time I wrote one, so you know sort of what to expect from the questions, that sort of thing. We'll cross the bridge when we get there. I don't expect you to memorize anything. Right? I've never, also while never having taken a test, I've never had an employer say, hey, you need to code this, but don't look anything up online. Because why would they do that? Right? Like no one's going to have it all in their head. We're going to use our resources, use our tools. So the exam will be open notes, open internet. Like you don't need to have it in your head. I don't care if you can memorize things. I care if you can solve problems. I care if you can write C++ code that works. That's That's what I care about. And then the bulk of your score in the class comes from the final project. We'll do this the last third of class or so. We'll try and take a larger project, takes about 4 weeks or so for us to work on, to have something a little bit bigger. This is our first semester coding, so it won't be any like amazing fancy, you'll be like, hey, look everybody, I made a really cool thing, but it'll be a little bit bigger. It'll be somewhat interesting, maybe, more than the homeworks, more than the projects, those sorts of things. So, and we'll have a couple different deliverables throughout that. So that'll make up 40% of your overall score. When we get closer to it and we get to it, right, I'll lay it all out, all the different pieces we need to do, the things we have to do. If you come back and look at these things like, hey, are we going to do diagrams? Are we going to write languages? Those, sure. So we'll get to the different pieces we need when we get there, but it's a larger bit. This table here should be standard. I got this off the syllabus template. So, right, if you are the kind of person who wants a particular GPA, right, you need to get a certain percentage. Right? So because this is weighted, right, your score in the projects category makes up 30% of your overall 100%. Right? So projects might be worth 10 points and 12 points and 15 points, but the points only matter within that category. So Canvas does all that for us. So hopefully it's not super confusing, but occasionally people are like, why don't you just everything have a bunch of points? I don't like doing all that math ahead of time to like make the points add up to 100 or 1,000 or whatever that works. So I just do the weights, and that usually works easier in my head. And the tool does it for me. All right, so our tentative course outline. So the things we'll get to throughout the semester here. So like Monday, Wednesday, should be all the dates here if I looked at the calendar right. We'll talk about the Intro to C++, which is the first chapter in Zybooks. We'll talk about GitHub. We'll talk about Visual Studio. We'll get going. We'll probably get into chapter 2 because there's just not that much intro. Probably on Wednesday. We'll start getting into chapter 2. Next week, no class on Monday for, is it Labor Day? Memorial Day? Labor Day. That's one of, I can never remember which one's which. So no class that Monday. Also no lab that Monday. But then the Wednesday we'll have the rest of chapter 2. And then we'll start talking about your first project, Project 0. We start counting at 0 for reasons. It won't make sense till we get to this chapter, but it's okay. It's a programming joke, I guess, that we start at 0. It's okay. We'll get there. And then, depending on the chapter, we take 1 week or 2 weeks to go through the chapter. We should be pretty much in sync with the other sections of 150. I copied off of Dr. Baca, who is the main person who teaches CIS 150 here. He's a really awesome guy, super smart. So I just copy his schedule, mostly, because he gave me last semester's schedule, not this one. So I assume his schedule is probably the same from summer to fall, but we'll get there. So we spend a week on chapter 3, 2 weeks on chapter 4, 2 weeks on chapter 5, a week on chapter 6, and then we break for midterm. We'll spend an entire session doing a review, and then session for the exam. I promise it's not so bad. Right? It'll be okay. We're in a computer lab here, which is great, so we can use the computers. So that's awesome. So it'll be in Canvas. 2 weeks on chapter 7, a week on chapter 8, and a week on chapter 9. We got a Thanksgiving break in the middle there. The last 2 sessions are dedicated just to your final project work time. So I can float around the room. I know finals week sucks. I never liked finals week when I was a student. So ideally, your final project is done by 12/6, and then you don't have to stress about anything. So instead of a final exam, we're all going to present our final projects. So we'll take turns sitting up front, showing off our code, running our project. It's going to be really boring because you're all going to do pretty much the same thing. But it's fun to see everyone will take a slightly different approach to it because there's lots of different ways to solve the problem. The problem gets solved. Sort of like a cake. I don't know if you ever slice cake. There's lots of different ways you can slice a cake. Most people care about getting the cake in their mouth. They don't really care how you sliced the cake, right? So as long as you solve that problem, it's okay. If you liked cutting wedges, or if you liked cutting squares, or if the cake's really tall, I don't know. My mother-in-law is a baker, and we eat lots of cake, so which is really bad for my diabetes. But lots of cake. You okay so far? All right, cool. I drink lots of coffee. This was full of coffee earlier today, so I've been told I talk fast. I'm trying to be a little slower. At the end of the semester, you'll have an opportunity to fill out an anonymous course evaluation. Please take the time to do them because they use them as part of our evaluation process. Even though we know end of semester surveys are not a good measure of those sorts of things, because if you teach a hard class, you get rated worse just because the class was hard. Like, okay, whatever, it's what it is. So take some time to do that. Someone had said at the end of one of my classes in the survey, anonymously, which perfectly valid feedback, they're fine. They said, Eric is like a squirrel with an adrenaline shot. I'm almost a little proud of that, at the same time embarrassed. So I've got 7 kids at home. So I drink coffee like all the time, like throughout, I'll drink it up till I go to bed. And then I'll just fall asleep, pass out, and I'll wake up again a couple hours later and I'll start drinking coffee again. So you just got to holler at me, slow me down. It's all good, right? You're not going to offend me if you shout at me and say, Eric, go back, right? You're helping your friends out, because if it's not clear to you, it's not clear to someone else, okay? I've been doing this for a lot of years. A lot of things make sense in my head because I've done it a lot, right? So that's why we try and go through the basics and go through the examples. And I'll be like, oh yeah, that's obvious. And you're like, no, Eric, that's not obvious. Just tell me that, okay? It's okay. All right. So some course-specific policies here. Academic integrity. I am particularly upset by people who engage in academic dishonesty by cheating, right? Because if you go to school and get a degree and you cheat your way through, you probably didn't really learn the stuff. Is that fair to say? If you cheated your way through? So that when you go get a job, because you have a degree, and jobs say you need a degree for things, because sure, right? They assume it's some sort of training, whatever we want to call it. That's another story. And you suck at your job, and they're going to fire you, and they're going to say, hey, U of M Dearborn did a terrible job teaching. We're not going to hire other U of M Dearborn graduates because their program must suck. Right? That's bad for all of us. Right? We don't want cheaters to pass and get degrees. So my mantra is cheaters don't get degrees. If you cheat in the class, you fail the class. You can try again later and take it again, which costs you a lot of money. Right? So hopefully that's the incentive, right? You don't want to have to pay a bunch of money to take the class again because you cheated. Ideally, you don't cheat because you want to learn. That's the goal, like the aspiration here. But I get it. We're humans, and stress and things like that, and you want to pass. Don't cheat though. Just ask questions. That's the easiest thing to do if you're struggling. Is you don't cheat. You just ask questions. Like, they pay me to sit here and talk to you and answer your questions. Right? Anybody can go get a book and read it. Right? Ideally, you're paying to have someone you can ask questions of. Sort of. I think that's generally the model there. So just ask. Right? I'm not going to tell you to go away. I'll make sure we straighten it out, figure out what didn't click in your head the first time or the second time or the third time. That's okay. Right? This stuff is hard. Learning to program is like learning another language, essentially. We're learning a computer language to speak to a computer. I took French for a year and sucked at it. Years later, I actually ended up in Paris with my family, and I could barely remember how to say like hi, goodbye, please, and thank you after a year of French in high school. Languages are hard, so it's okay. And that's why we've got all these extra services. We've got the Success Center with tutors. We've got our supplemental instructor. We've got lab sessions, right? It's okay if it's hard. So, all right, all sorts of things here, right? You're encouraged to help each other. You are welcome to talk to each other. That's fantastic. What you don't do, though, is give someone your code. So when your classmate says, hey, I just want to see how you solve the problem, they don't want to just see how you solve the problem. They want to take your answer and turn it in. So tell them to get lost, right? You're welcome to talk about it. Hey, I took this approach and I thought I would take this and do this operation, and I should. It doesn't make any sense that we've talked about C++ yet. So you can talk about it all you want in English. The point where you start giving them code, we've gone too far, right? So that's a pretty easy rule of thumb, right? We can collaborate, we can talk about ideas, but we don't share the code, okay? The dean's office gets notified, the academic code of conduct committee gets notified. It's all messy. I don't know why I copied this off of another one. I'm sorry that's bolded. It sounds really obnoxious here. I come off sounding like a jerk. I sort of am about it, but just ask me questions, right? It's okay. So if you are involved in an academic integrity violation, you fail the class. There is no like, you get 0 on the assignment, you get to nothing, you just immediately fail the class, right? I want to discourage people from cheating as strongly as I can, and this is the strongest thing I can do is fail them. So please don't do it, okay? If you've seen a site like chegg.com, do yourself a favor and stay off it. Chegg.com is an awful website. They're getting sued, thankfully, but by Pearson, who I also hate, so I'm like conflicted. I don't know who I want to win there. But Chegg.com is awful. They let people pay to cheat. They're like, hey, we'll have a tutoring service you can pay for, which does your homework for you. They're like, no, please don't give us your homework to our tutoring service that they let you pay for. We don't want you to turn in your homework. We don't want our tutors to solve your homework for you. And they don't do anything about it. They're awful. They have a service where I can take an exam and give it to them, and they'll say for 24 hours, they won't let any of my exam questions get posted on their website. After 24 hours, F you, Eric. We'll let the student post your exam questions. Like, if you can keep it off for 24 hours, you can keep it off indefinitely. But they said no because this is how they make their money. If you can't tell, I don't like Chegg. So other similar sites, Course Hero, there's a bunch of them, right? Just stay off, right? There are legitimate sites we can use for help. Now, there's a website called Stack Overflow. It used to be like the most popular coding website out there for getting help, answering questions. It's a phenomenal community. People would just, out of the goodness of their hearts, answer questions for people. It's starting to die thanks to ChatGPT and other AI tools, which is an interesting problem because then ChatGPT won't have any data to train itself on if there's no one asking questions on sites like Stack Overflow. So it might kill itself, but we'll see. Right? The future is fun for sure. So don't post anything there. Don't use them as a source there. If you want to go out to legitimate sites like Stack Overflow and say, hey, I found an algorithm that does something and cite that as a source, fantastic. Sort of like English paper rules, right? If you use something that's not yours, you cite your source. I'll show you how to do that in code. There's a big joke around in the developer community that everyone just copy pastes stuff from online that they find. It's true, right? You don't want to spend time reinventing the wheel. You want to spend your time solving problems. So if someone already has a solution that does this little piece here and you need that little piece, you go use it. The open source community, developer community is fantastic. People are like, hey, I wrote a cool thing. You can have it. That's amazing. And I love that community. Like, we're excited and supportive of each other. And there are ugly bits to it too. And that's okay. Nothing's perfect out there, but that's what we do all day long. Right? That's what developers do, is they find something that's already done and they use it to solve their problem. They take this little piece, they take this tool and they use it. I don't expect anything different of you, but this is academia, right? And you have to imagine it kind of like an English paper. You can take pieces here and take the pieces and put the pieces together, but you're adding original effort. So this idea here, like an English paper, you don't just turn in one giant quotation. Hey, here's a paper on Shakespeare I found online, one quote. It doesn't work, right? But you can say, hey, here's something this author said about this Shakespeare play here that was really interesting. I'm going to add that as a quote or a reference in my paper, and then I'll talk about that with my original thought, right? I think you've all written English papers by now. Okay, cool. Same thing applies, right? You are welcome to use your sources online. There's a really cool tool when the internet's back on, eventually. U of M has their own ChatGPT style tool, the 4th edition. I don't know how they number these things anyway, but which is supposed to be the best one currently. But if you wait a week or two, they'll probably be like 4.5. I don't know. The software industry is amazing, but like the pace of change is rough sometimes. That's okay. We'll get there. So you're welcome to use it. It's a great tool. It's out there. MIT has a really good one that they've actually trained specifically to be, more helpful and less give you answers for their College of Engineering, Computer Science, or whatever their school's called. I forget what it is there. So that, hey, I want to ask it questions and it's not going to give me solutions, but it'll point me in the right direction. That's phenomenal. I think that might be the future of education as we get there. We'll see. You can talk to your friends at the College of Health and Human Services and Educate. I forget. We have so many different names around here. But this sort of, hey, I can ask the computer questions and it can give me, helpful prodding in the right direction so I can still learn things instead of it just feeding me solutions. That's amazing. I've got friends who I used to work with who now work at Khan Academy. Have you heard about Khan Academy? It's a really cool online platform for learning. They're looking at how they can use AI to be like a virtual coach, teacher, sort of. I mean, teacher's maybe the wrong word there, but to help students doing their online learning, like, hey, I didn't get this part. And we can sort of use that to go along. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't understand the important. Can you explain?
Mhm.
That,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's an amazing tool. You can give it code and say, hey, can you explain this? Which is cool. And the different way you can use prompts that I think you said, explain it to me like I'm 5. It sounds really silly, but like it's true. Like, let me break it down into simple steps here into easy language. There's a lot of crazy jargon we use and technical terms we use because I think most professions have their own set of jargon, their own technical terms, and you just sort of get used to it. But if you're not used to it yet, because you're just starting off, it's going to feel like a lot. Like, what do all these terms mean? And that's okay, right? So having it explain it is awesome. People have used it before for additional help, additional exercises. Like, hey, I want some practice on this. Give me some problems for it. And then you try it, and you can say, like, okay, now can you show me the solution? You compare your results, those sorts of things. There's amazing possibilities out there. Honestly, there's not enough time in the day to do all the things with it, right? But it's a great resource. I'm going to tell you, use it. Go for it. What you need to do, though, is cite it as a source. So what's weird about ChatGPT is there's no way that I know of, at least, to like share that sort of conversation. Has anyone not used ChatGPT? I should start there. Okay, so when you ask it questions, it like sort of keeps a record, that thread of this conversation. You can go back to it as a user, but best I can tell, there's no way to share that individual thread. So like, say, okay, this is the first question I asked, and then it gave me this, and here's the second question I asked, and it gave me this, and then I said, hey, tell me more about this. So the sort of flow of the conversation, you can get back to it, but you can't share it with me. Best I can tell. That'd be a cool feature eventually, and maybe our UMich folks will work on that in the IT department when they're not so busy. But so to cite it as a source, you can't just say, hey, chatgpt.com. or whatever the website happens to be, because that's not helpful. Like, I don't know what you asked it. I don't know what it gave you, that sort of thing. So what I'd like you to do, and I'll show you how eventually once we can get internet working and that sort of stuff, you just cite it, including the prompt that you used, the question that you asked. So like, hey, I asked it for an algorithm to sort things from highest to lowest. That's what you're going to put in your comment here. It's like citing your source here. Great, and we're good. Sorting things from high to low is not an interesting problem to solve. You'll go through a process of studying it at some point when you look at sorting and selection and that sort of things to like understand why, but no one goes and does it themselves from scratch, right? There's like pre-built tools that you just say, hey, sort this please, and C++ says, sure, I'll sort it for you. Right? So I don't care if you get an algorithm from it. That's okay. It's no big deal. But we're not going to get the entire, you're not going to plug in, hey, here's my project 0, solve it for me, please. Now we have a problem, right? And it's difficult to prove if you've used it, which I understand that. And I'm not going to come down and say, hey, it looks like you used ChatGPT and the internet told me you did because I plugged it into a website. There's a prof out there who made the news for failing students who didn't cheat because he was an idiot. But it's okay. He was not not well-versed in artificial intelligence tools. That's okay. And like this website says, hey, we can detect whether or not students use this on a paper. And he plugged in their papers and it said they used it. But the site was wrong because you can't do that. Okay, so that's all right. So ideally, you're getting a consistent message across U of M, and we're all saying, no, those online detection tools don't work, don't use them. But that's what the people who are smart about these things have told us, and the college policy is, please don't use them. Academia is kind of weird, and they can't really tell me to do things. They can say, I have to teach these topics, and that's about the extent of what you get, which has its pluses and has its minuses, because you get some crazy people like me, and you get some really good people like some of the other profs here. But a variety of experience and learning with folks generally is pretty good, because you're going to get a variety of people out in the industry that you work with. And you don't always get, you can quit the company and go work somewhere else, but you don't always get to pick your coworkers, you don't always get to pick your managers, you don't always get to pick the leaders in your organization, unless you change organizations. So we'll pretend like it's a good model for real life and be happy enough. All right, for late projects and homework, I don't take things late. When projects are due, usually they're going to be due at 11 a.m. on a particular day. I'll go over the solution in class. Not that I didn't think you could solve it, but I think that there's value in me going through the process of solving these things. Right? Again, the particular details of I wrote ABC plus minus 2, 3, like whatever the code we write. Again, doesn't make a lot of sense till we get there. The code itself is not the interesting piece. The process of solving the problem is the interesting part. And that's what ideally we're going to be learning is how to solve problems. That's the goal. So I'll go through and show you how I will solve the problem. And I'll show you how I write the code and those sorts of things here. With Visual Studio, if you get the more expensive versions, there's an AI assist, they call it GitHub Copilot. And they keep pushing this as a trial on people because they're going to make more money off of it, of course. I would strongly discourage you from turning that on, especially in the beginning here when you're still learning how to code. It's a phenomenal tool. There's a really great keynote speech that Scott Hanselman and I forget the other guy's name did at Microsoft for their Build event, where they went and built a asteroids game using AI sort of tools and code completion sort of tools, and they were able to do it in an hour between the two of them. Once you know what you're doing, yes, please use the tools. Like you don't have to waste your time typing all the letters out. But if we're still learning what we're doing, having the computer complete it for us is sort of short-circuiting that process of us figuring out and understanding how it all works. And then when it doesn't do exactly what you want, because AI is not perfect, right? It is not going to be 100%. It's really hard to fix it if the only thing you've ever done is say, give me a solution AI, give me a solution AI, give me a solution AI, right? We don't really know how to troubleshoot. Are any of you car people? Like mechanical things? I hate cars because when they break, I have no idea what's wrong with them. That's so out of my wheelhouse. I'm not that engineering type of mechanical person to be like, oh yeah, obviously it's this part over here that I hate them, and I have to take them to somewhere else, and I have to pay a bunch of money to someone who has expert experience in fixing them to fix it, right? And why you pay mechanics a lot of money is not because it's hard to take these things apart. We could all take this car apart, but to know what to do and to know the right piece and how to do, like the experience that they have in learning the details of how these things work. That's sort of what we're doing here right? When we're working with our code. So we need to understand the details of how it actually works so that I can put the pieces together again. I can take it apart, put it together again, right? Okay. Some other things, there is a food pantry on campus. I think this is still their phone number. Again, this came off the syllabus template, that should be right. Feel free to reach out to them, please. If you've done any intro to psychology sort of things, there's this cool guy named Maslow, and he has the hierarchy of needs. I don't know if this rings any bells for people, but like you can't focus on the hard stuff if the basic stuff of like food and shelter isn't satisfied. If you're worried about those things, it's really, really, really hard to focus on anything else if you don't have food and shelter. So again, reach out to them if you need any sort of assistance. Great resource as well. Our COVID policy, this is still in the template now. Go out to the website. Sure. And then Canvas, eventually when it's online, has all the other sorts of policies and lists and things. So you don't get 10 pages of boilerplate stuff in syllabi, which is fun. So that's out here in Canvas. We can go take a look at that. Wow, I spent 45 minutes reading 3 pages to you. I'm sorry. Sorry. That's rough. All right, questions, thoughts, concerns? You okay so far? All right, I'll get this on Canvas. Once Canvas comes online, I have to go hit the publish button and add this, and you'll get a lot of notifications from Canvas. You can turn them off if you want. You can like go in and customize those sorts of things. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes it's too much. So like give it a week or so and see if you think they're useful or not before you turn them off. Is that a question? Yeah. If we can log into computers, we can do a lab. If we can't log into computers and there's no internet, there's nothing we're going to do. Because you could use your laptops on like cell phone hotspots, but yeah. No, there's no points for attendance. I mean, your participation in Zybooks and labs is as much attendance as it's going to be. Things come up. People get busy. You don't have to be here. I will attempt to, we'll see how well it works, stream these things and record them and post the recordings online. That being said, I've found that people who don't attend don't do as well. I don't have the statistical numbers for you, and I can't give you like raw data on that. That's a little bit more anecdotal at this point. But since before COVID, actually, I started streaming online because I would teach a Thursday night class from like 6 to 9 p.m. in C#. It's my favorite class to teach here. And in the winter, the roads get rough, right? Which is awkward, and people would be coming from work and things like that, and they miss. I'd be like, hey, I watch people on Twitch. I'm a big nerd. I like watching people play games and things, and it's not just games, but generally games. I could probably stream on Twitch, so I started streaming in 2019 the classes. They're like, hey, you can just watch online, and then it's like got a one-click button, export to YouTube, which is amazing. So I'll put them out there. I'm recording right now using OBS because I don't have the bandwidth to stream, I'm assuming. This laptop might struggle with streaming, so I might just end up doing recordings for now until I can get a better laptop. But in between laptops, this one it's not my favorite, but it gets the job done. So we'll see how that goes. But the plan is to have at least all the lectures recorded for you. I don't record the labs because I'm not like sitting there talking the whole time. I would recommend you come to lab and get the work done. If you don't come, you don't come. That's okay. You can still turn in the stuff. You can work from anywhere. Right? It's software. Like you can log into Canvas from anywhere, do the assignment, turn it into Canvas. I'll never know. Yeah, question?
So it says lab to 10% of the grade.
Yes.
Does that mean the grade is shared in the lab?
So the lab section is like a different section in Canvas, but because you're all in my lecture and my lab, I'm not going to use the lab section. I'm just going to do it all in the main one because otherwise it's more work for me to like have two different ones, and then I can put it all in one gradebook. Yeah, so all the lab assignments will show up in the main course gradebook section there. No, you're good. No. No, so there's no final for the lab, like the final project. Yeah. No. So I don't think so. I've never had to plug in a grade for lab. Yeah, I think it's all one because it'll only show up on your transcript as one. So yeah, I'm trying to think because you have to register for two. The whole system's weird. I'm sorry. It was designed so that like you could take any lab and any class, but then we realized it's awkward to take someone else's lab when you're in someone else's class. And we're like, that's probably a bad idea. Yeah.
Yeah, so the course is 4 credits and lab 0.
Okay.
So it automatically counts for just this course.
Okay, so it shows up as a 0 credit. Okay, yeah, it's weird how they count these sorts of things. But yep. All right, cool. So we got a little bit more time here. I want to show you Visual Studio and how to write a program. If computers turn back on and we have access, so I can't even email you by 4 p.m. if we're going to have lab or not, which sucks. There's probably a sign on the door that says labs don't meet the first week, which other people don't meet their labs the first week, and I think they're stupid. Like, why give up that time? Because there's so many things we need to talk about for lab anyway. So you're all here anyway, right? Are you going to go home in between the end of this and lab at 4 p.m. or something? Like you're planning to be here all day anyway, right? Okay, so why don't you just come at 4 p.m. and I'll be there. And if we can log into the computers, we'll do something. If not, I'll say, sorry, go home early. Is that, because I have no other way of communicating with you really, unless you want to give me all your cell phone numbers and I can start one big text chat or something. I could do that, I guess. I have paper. You could write your cell phone number down. Wow, we can do things like without the internet. This is a weird world. Okay, we can try that. I think I've got some paper. Yeah, we'll try that, and that way I'll text you. What if it turns on at like 3:55 though? I'm having trouble now with this idea. It's like if I text you at 4 p.m., you're like, yeah, we have lab, but you're not here. I don't know. Yeah. All right, we should plan to meet. If you want to go home and do it later, that's totally cool. Like I'm not going to judge you at all. That's all right. You want to take it early today. I'll plan to be there, and we can try. If you have a laptop, we can try. Yeah, we'll have lots of time. So I won't be able to stream it because again, the internet on my phone tether is not great. But it won't be due the end of today. We'll have time to make up if you missed anything. We'll have lots of time. It's just in the intro lab. So the only sad part is we don't have lab next week either. So in 9/11, we'll have some work to do in lab. It won't be too bad. Most of the time you walk out of that hour, 45-minute session and you're done. Sometimes you have a little bit of work to do later. Sometimes you show up for the first half hour and you're like, I'm just fried because it's been a long Monday. I want to go home. Great, I'll see you later. That's perfectly fine. Totally up to you. I'm very flexible about it. Nothing is going to be due that same end of the lab session. It's always due the next week. So you've got time if you need it there. I try and make things flexible when I can because life happens. I'm busy all the time. I get how that is. So, but without deadlines, people don't turn things in. I've had colleagues be like, hey, I'm going to take away all the due dates to reduce all the stress from people. And then you're all wonderful people. I'm sure you'll turn stuff in on the recommended due date. But occasionally, if you're like me, you're like, hey, it's not due till December. I don't have to start it now. And then December comes and you're like, you have 15 things to do instead of one per week. So the due dates are there to help you, right? Not to be a penalty. So like if something needs to slide for a lab, I'm perfectly fine being flexible there, right? The labs are participation, right? I want you to get them done for your practice. The projects I can't take late because once I've gone over a solution, it's not fair to everyone else to take it, right? So the projects will have hard deadlines, right? But labs, if we need to flex, we can flex. We'll be flexible. All right. So let me show you Visual Studio here. This is the Community Edition, which is the free one, right? There's all sorts of cool bells and whistles you can get with their paid versions. Great. We don't need any of those bells and whistles right now, right? Eventually, you can go out there and probably the company that you work for will pay for your license for Visual Studio for the bells and whistles. It's expensive, but that's how they make their money, right? So when you start it, it looks kind of crazy. There's not a whole lot going on here. So most of what we're going to do is this create new project section here. There's other fun things we can do. You can open previous ones, but for when we get to projects, probably it'll take more than one sitting. All the other things are probably like, I'm going to sit down, do the thing, and be done with it. One sitting, right? So if you want to come back to it, open, or like it's got a recent list here, great, you're good. But mostly new projects. Depending on what you've installed, so Visual Studio, when you download it, it actually installs the Visual Studio installer tool, not Visual Studio, which is, sure. Visual Studio installer lets you pick what things do you actually want to do with Visual Studio, because it does a gazillion things. It's an amazing tool to do all sorts of things here. So I'm going to do modify, and it has this idea of workloads. So workload is, hey, I want all the tools to do this sort of thing. So if you want to do ASP.NET and web development, you check this box. If you don't install it, save a little space on your hard drive. Right? If you want to do stuff in Azure, their cloud service, you check this box. Right? What we care about is desktop development with C++, the one called C++. That one's pretty easy for us to find. I've got a couple other ones installed myself because I do other things in other classes, but you need desktop development with C++. That's really the only box you need checked right now. You can check any of them. You can check all of them, whatever you want to do. But desktop development is what we want. Once that's done, then now when I go start a project, you get this a gazillion buttons here again. This first drop-down box is what language do you want? You can go all languages and go find it yourself. Like this is all the different project templates, like starter bits they give you. It's no fun to scroll through here. So I always just go filter and say, hey, I want C++. And there's tons of options of just C++ stuff, right? What we are going to start with, because it's easy, is the empty project. It's empty. It doesn't give us anything. Console apps are fun, but it comes with a bunch of other junk, and we don't really need all that other junk. We want to try and keep things simple. So you could have easy, or you could have simple, which seems a little weird that they're different, but we're going to start simple. Later we can do the easy one, because it doesn't really matter if we have all the other stuff, but I don't want to have lots of other things right now. So we'll say empty. We go next. Now it says, what do you want to call it? So in Visual Studio, things are organized in what they call solutions. And solutions have one or more projects. That's just the naming convention. So now it says project, but it actually makes a solution with a project. You can name them differently. I don't think it's worth your time, right? You can have multiple projects in one solution. Again, probably not worth your time because it just is going to be more complex. So for everything we're going to do in this class, there's one project to one solution. We keep them all the same, and that's easy. So like, hey, lab 0. Great. Now it's going to say, where do you want to put it? Now, we haven't done the GitHub stuff yet. So later we'll talk about what folder to put it in because GitHub uses a very specific folder. I think I can do that actually because I've got enough internet here. No, I'll show you later once we all have working internet. So later this location will matter. It sort of matters now because this is where it's saved. Like if you like to put stuff in a OneDrive or a Google Drive or a particular folder, if you have a school folder and then you have a semester, however you want to organize it, great. You just need to know where it's going to put it. So mine's called Lab 0. It's going to go in this default location, source repos, sure. That's where we're going to go get it here. And we'll say create. All right, here's all the crazy buttons. And this, I believe, is the default layout. I try not to change it because I like defaults, because then it's easy. Like if I change versions or upgrade, it usually sticks with the default, and that makes me happy. They've got a thing you can import your settings, and you can move things around this window like crazy, and you can like unpin things or click pins, and if it ever looks weird, it's okay. We can always get back to the defaults, right? And if you customize it and you like it, sure, have it customized. So this right-hand side is the Solution Explorer. This is showing me what's in that solution that I just made, right? The solution has a project named Lab 0. So Solution Lab 0, this is Project Lab 0. It's really hard to see, but there's 2 little pluses here for a C++ project. That's a tiny little icon. Sure, that's my project. Projects have a couple things then. Projects have references, external dependencies, header files, resource files, and source files. For the first, like, 2/3 of class, we're only ever going to do source files. Eventually we'll get to the header files. We're never going to touch the other things at this level. But the idea is I can organize these things and say, hey, my project depends on this code over here. I didn't write this code over here. Just reference it. Say, okay, I know there's code over here. And it's all sorts of cool things. We call them libraries or other fancy names and things like that. Like, I want this library of code. Great. We can go reference that as an external dependency and all sorts of fun things. We'll get there eventually. It's a lot. I'm sorry, jumping in. But we're going to try and start simple. So source files is what we want. But we don't have any, right, because we said empty. So I'm going to right-click source files and say, hey, I want to add a new item. I want to add a new source file. Now, source, it means it's the source code. Source code is the thing that people can read that the computer can also read. That's your source code, right? We have to follow the rules that C++ gives us so that C++ can understand the code we write. But we're going to do the writing. We're going to create that source code in something that we understand as well. So we do a new item, and we give it a name. Again, I like when things match, so I'm going to say Lab 0. The file extension here is .cpp for C++. It's a C++ file, sure. Right? You can change it if you want. It doesn't really matter what the extension is. Visual Studio will figure it out, but generally you don't change it, because if everyone stays with the same convention, it's very easy to read someone else's code, because we've all done the same thing the same way, right? So conventions are great because they just make life easier for all of us. So I'm going to say, okay, let's add it. Now I get in the left-hand side, the main part of the screen, now there's something here. And this can have all sorts of tabs. You can have all sorts of things open at once. Lots of fun. We'll get to more complex things eventually. But right now, this is Lab 0 CPP, and you see it 1 here. This is line 1, right? When you get to source code files, we like to number things by line. So I say line 1, line 2, line 3, 4, whatever. We will reference line numbers all the time. And when things don't work in our code, it will reference line numbers and say, hey, it broke at line 5, or it broke at line 27, or it broke at line 7,292. Yeah. Anytime you hit enter, is the next line. Yep. Yeah. So interestingly, like C++ itself does not care about line breaks. We put the line breaks in for people because we like to be able to see things, to make it visual for us. You can have all of your code on one line. I do not recommend that. That is just awful. It's a funny prank to like send someone some code and be like, ha ha ha, it's like 7,000 characters on one line. You never hit the enter key. Sure, it's legitimate code. It will work and run, but it's ugly, right? Like, let's not do that. All right, so a couple things. Please don't write this down. You don't have to memorize it at all. I'll give you this sample here, but you type a bunch of things before we start. It's just boilerplate code. Again, this is the simple version, not the easy version where we get all of that. I got trade-offs. It's okay. So we do a couple things. We say the pound sign, and I'm old enough to know this is a pound sign, not a hashtag. The technical term here is octothorpe, I learned, which is really fun. So if you start talking about octothorpes, people will just look at you really funny. I enjoy when people look at me funny because I'm used to it by now. Like everyone knows I'm a giant nerd. No one's surprised by that. So when I go around saying silly things, my kids just roll their eyes at me. My friends are like, yeah, whatever, Eric, sure. So anyway, the pound sign, most people know it, or hashtag. I don't recommend you call it a hashtag. People will know you don't know what you're doing in the programming world if you say hashtag this, because like that's not what it's called in coding. At least not yet. Well, once all of you are in industry, maybe we'll have modernized our lingo and that sort of thing. But for now, it's a pound sign. So we say pound include, and then a space, and then the greater than and less than signs. And inside of that, we say IO for input output stream, IO stream. Again, don't have to memorize this at all. Don't worry. I'll give you the template here. We're just going to type it in here. So we're telling C++, hey, I would like to include the input output stream library in my code. I would like things to go in and come back out. If you don't have an output stream, no one sees any results when you write your program, which for some programs is perfectly fine. You don't need to see results every time, right? But for our purposes, we want to see something on the screen so we can see what happened, that sort of thing. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to get to writing graphical user interface applications where you can actually use your mouse and click on buttons. We don't get to that. That takes a while. I'm sorry. So everything will happen in a black box where you type text in. It's really dull. I'm sorry. That's it. I'm sorry. Okay. After that, then we're going to say using namespace std for standard. Long time ago, computers didn't used to be as powerful, and every letter mattered because storage was expensive and all sorts of things here. So instead of typing out the word standard, they say std. Not thinking years down the road, people would laugh when you say, hey, I'm using std. Sure, whatever. Ha ha ha. Okay. So this is the standard namespace. The way things are named in C++, we're saying, hey, I would like you to assume I'm going to use everything out of the standard namespace for now, so I don't have to specify. This saves us a lot of typing. You don't have to do this. You can type the standard namespace every time you want to do something that's in the standard namespace. I would argue that good programmers are lazy. That's kind of my working theory here, is that we are too lazy to do things we don't need to do. Right? We want to be efficiently lazy. I don't want to do stuff that is already done for me. Right? I want to take all the shortcuts I can because that saves me time and makes me more efficient. You want to be efficiently lazy, right? It might make more sense later. Okay. You're looking at me like I'm crazy, which is fair. That's okay. All right. Then we say int here. This is short for integer. We'll get into that later. Main, and then a set of parentheses. Then everyone's favorite thing in C++ is to use curly braces. That's the shift square brace key above the enter. And these always come in pairs. You open a curly brace and you end a curly brace. This is one of the rules of C++. You open a parenthesis, you end a parenthesis. Things need to be balanced. So they have special meaning to C++. And then I enter down a bunch here, have a bunch of new lines. Again, the empty lines don't matter. They get ignored by the computer. We put empty lines in because it makes us humans able to see this and understand it better. Right? At the end of main, right before your last curly brace here, you say return 0. Sure. Long time ago, programs used to come with a giant book. And the book, at the end of it, had this list of error codes. And if your program returned error code 27, you'd go look at the back of the book and say, what does error code 27 mean? And you could look it up. This is a legacy of that. Nowadays, computers can actually give you messages and storage is cheap. I can code all of that into my program so you don't have to go look at a stupid book to say, oh, what does error 329 mean? Right? So 0 was the code for everything's good, all set. Nothing went wrong. Anything other than 0 was bad, generally. So we're going to end with the return 0 and say all good. So this is the boilerplate code we're going to do anytime we start a project. You can copy paste it, you can save it in a file, you can do whatever you want here. Eventually I'll show you how to use the easy template with all the extra junk that we don't care about. I'm just not fond of the junk right now. That's probably more confusing. So it's okay, we can type it. You don't have to memorize it, I promise. After having done it a bunch of times, it might be in your head. Yeah?
How would you compare C++ to MATLAB?
They are wildly different. Yeah, so MATLAB is a whole different animal designed specifically for mathematical stuff. C++ can do everything. MATLAB can't do everything. So, MATLAB has its own syntax or rules for how you write it so that MATLAB can understand how to run it. C++ has the same. So they're both programming languages. So they have some similarities, but generally wildly different. Yeah. Are you an engineering major?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, the engineering folks love MATLAB, which is great. It's good for engineering stuff. Right? I hate MATLAB. That's just me. Anyway, it's a great tool. All right. Now that we have this here, I can hit the run button here, the local Windows debugger. You can also go to the debug menu here and say start debugging. You can also hit the F5 key. The general rule in Visual Studio is there's like at least 3 ways to do everything. If you like keyboard shortcuts, great. If you like to use your mouse, great. If you want to click through a menu, great. If you want a fast button, great. However you like to do it, it's fantastic. Some people are very interesting in the programming world, and they will never take their hands off their keyboard because they're a super efficient developer. Great. Amazing for them. I'm too lazy to remember all the shortcuts. There's some shortcuts I know, like F5. I'd use that one a lot. But I'm going to come back to my mouse all the time here. They can code 3 times faster than I can because they don't have to touch their mouse. Good for them, right? Sure. I still get paid to be a programmer. Like, no one's ever said, oh, do you use the mouse? No, you can't work here. So that's okay. So if I go to run now, or hit F5, I'll get a black box. Everything is going to be this ugly black box. You'll get used to it. It's okay. There's nothing here except for this boilerplate thing. It says, hey, C users, ET, CHARN1, source, repos, lab0, x64, debug, lab0.exe, process. Oh my goodness. This is terrible. Well, what happened is this program here, this executable.exe is short for executable. This is something you can click on to run, ran, and it exited with code 0. By the way, if you want this window to close, you can go here, here, here in the menu. We generally don't want it to close. We like it to stay open so that I can see what happened, right? Sure, that's nice. So if I want, I can go find this path here, which is fun. Let me go grab that. So a right click in this window will copy, and then it unhighlights here, which is weird, but that's fine. So let me go paste it in here. Control C for copy, Control V for paste. I'm going to use lots of keyboard shortcuts. I'll try and explain them the first couple times. If it looks like magic, I promise it's not magic. So inside of here, I have lab0 and lab0.pdb. This one is the type of application. Oh, it's my view settings here. When you go to your options here, you want your, where is it here? Wow. Hide extensions. This is the worst option here, and I hate this, that they defaulted for people. They hide the file extensions. Most people could care less about the file extension. You don't care if it's a TXT file or a DOC file or a XLS file or whatever, right? Excel or Word, those sorts of things. Programmers usually care about our extensions because we like files. So now I can see it's lab0.exe. There we go. So if I double click this one now, it ran and it's done. Because I ran the executable, it ran and closed itself when it's done. I have no idea what it did. I didn't see any output. It might do a task, right? We can have it work with files or do things and all sorts of fun stuff we can have it do, but I didn't see any results. That was sad. So that's why Visual Studio says, hey, I'm going to leave this open for you until you press any button here. Now press any key and it closes, right? So this lab0.exe, I could send to somebody. I could put on a flash. Do people still use flash drives? Like most email programs don't let you send exe files because they're like, this could be really bad for you. Don't run it, which is true. Don't run exes that people give you, right? That sort of thing. So anyway, you could just give this to someone and it will run and do its job. Not very exciting right now because we haven't done anything. So let me come back here. So if I want to spit something out on the screen, make it show on the screen, we say cout. Cout for output something. And then we use a set of arrows. Don't know why, but we're going to say arrow, arrow. And it's going to point towards the cout. Because I want to send something towards the cout here. And then in quotes here, that's full quotations, I'm going to say hello world. If I could spell right, hello world. And then I'm going to put another set of arrows here, and I'm going to type endl or end line. Not that important right now, but as you have more than one line of output, if you don't add your end lines or your return characters, your enter keys, it all goes on one line. So this is a great way of going down to the next line. So now when I run it, I should see hello world. For some reason, this is the very first program people write. It's been a tradition for years and years and years and years and years. I don't know who started it, but anytime you learn a new language, the first thing you do in that language is make it say hello world. Sure, it's fun. It's like the computer's talking to you or somebody. The computer's not awake or alive, I promise. But we just make it say hello world. Shows it's fun. Okay, so now I see my output. So I'm going to just copy paste this, and I can put a bunch of these things in here. Come on. Sure, we'll have it say a bunch of times. right? It'll do this a bunch of times now. And we get hello world up. My computer's very happy. It's been drinking a lot of coffee as well. This is actually coffee mixed with espresso. It's like my bonus happy drink for Mondays. Because, what? A red eye? It's my Monday drink. So it's all good. So I have this cute little espresso pot. It's the Moki pot or something. I do that for this espresso and my pot of coffee, and it all fits in my thermos here, and I can take it with me. It is so good. All right. Anyway, so here's my window here. Now, again, if I come back to this folder here, oh, I lost it. Where did it go? Oh, I don't want to have to copy paste it. Hang on. Let me go copy paste it again. We'll come back to this folder. Let me go put. I don't like to have to browse, click all the buttons here again, so I just copy paste into the path here. When I run it, did you see it? Hello world? You probably didn't see it. It was too fast. So if you would like it to pause when you run, you can do this thing. You say cin, and with cin, you go the other direction. Now, cin doesn't work right away because we haven't got there yet. It's okay. So I'm just going to say int a, and we'll cin a. Sure, that's fine. Don't worry about that. I just want to show you that the program will wait for input now. Cin is for input. Cout is for output. Input is, I'm going to wait for someone to type something, like 1, sure. But now when I go double click it here and run it, it's open because it's waiting for input. So depending on whose class you take, some people are like, hey, you should always end with a cin. But Visual Studio does that for us, right? I don't want to have to type more things, but you can if you want to. Totally an option. No worries there at all. Perfectly fine. So I'm actually going to remove that because I think that's annoying. But you might see that in some people's examples, like they end with a cin just waiting. So there we go. All right, I've got almost 12:15. We'll try and meet up at 4. Maybe we can log into the computers and work on a lab. If not, we can just hang out. If you've got laptops, great. Downloading Visual Studio off a tethered Wi-Fi connection is a bad idea. It is several gig worth of download. It's not the smallest tool out there. But we can at least chat maybe and have some fun. And I'll have some more coffee if you like coffee. Although we don't drink coffee in labs. So I have a lid on mine, but if you break it, you buy it. It's generally the rule of thumb, so we really discourage eating and drinking in labs because you folks don't want to buy these computers, right? Okay. All right, any other questions, thoughts, concerns before we break? Yes. I'm sorry? Probably not, because if like they come back on at 3:55, I would text and say, hey, lab is on. So I don't know if that'd be useful. But you're welcome to text me. My number's here. At the top of the syllabus that you don't have because Canvas is down. Apparently, if you're logged into your email, it'll still work. Don't log out because the login system is down, is what has broken everything. Turns out if we can't authenticate users, you can't do a whole lot on the network, which is fun. So, okay, so I've got the recording. I'll post this later. I typically post them as public YouTube videos because I'm too lazy to make them private. That being said, your voice might be on it. Right? Your face isn't going to be on it unless you come up behind me here. Is that if you prefer not, I can try and post them privately and do all sorts of things and give you the private links and whatnot. But that's a lot of, and then if I'm using Twitch, it even more trouble. So generally it's public. If you have concerns, please reach out. Let me know. I'll see what I can do. But we'll see how that works in the future. Okay. Awesome. Well, it's nice to meet all of you. Hopefully we can meet up in lab and maybe we'll at least get a chance to introduce ourselves. It takes me a really long time to learn names. I'm just bad at it. I'm sorry. And if you don't talk to me, I don't learn your name. My apologies. But I would love to learn all your names. So we'll get there. All right. Thanks so much.